You're here, aren't you? Drawn, perhaps, by a whisper in your bones, a tug at the edge of your heart that hums with the word empath. But let's not linger on the surface, where empathy is painted as a soft glow, a halo of kindness. No, we're diving deeper, into the raw, unpolished truth of what it means to carry the pain of others, to be a vessel for shadows that don't belong to you. This isn't about being sensitive in the way the world loves to romanticize. This is about the psychic undertow, the invisible current that pulls empaths toward other people's suffering, sometimes until they drown in it. Picture this: a woman stands alone in a field at dusk, her hands trembling as if they're holding something heavy, though they're empty. The air around her hums with voices, grief, rage, longing, not hers, but she feels them as if they were. Her chest tightens, her breath catches, and she doesn't know why. This is the empath, not as a saintly figure bathed in light, but as a conduit, a lightning rod for the unspoken anguish of the world. And here's the secret no one tells you: that gift, that exquisite ability to feel, can become a trap. It can become an addiction. Why addiction? Because the empath doesn't just feel the pain of others, they're drawn to it, magnetized by it, as if their soul has made a pact to bear what others cannot. It's not a choice, not at first. It's a reflex, wired deep in the psyche, often forged in the fires of childhood or even inherited through ancestral lines. The empath learns early to sense the unspoken, to read the room, to carry what's too heavy for others. A child soothing a parent's silent rage, a sibling absorbing a family's grief, these are the origins of the empath's path. But what begins as survival can spiral into something else, a need to feel the pain, to be the one who holds it, because in that act, there's a strange, intoxicating sense of purpose. This isn't about blame. It's about seeing clearly. The empath's heart is a doorway, wide open to the world's unprocessed shadows, grief no one has mourned, anger no one has named, fear no one has faced. And when you're that doorway, the world pours through you. A friend's unspoken despair becomes your sleepless night. A stranger's bitterness lingers in your body like a bruise. You don't just feel it, you become it, and that's where the danger lies. Because when you're so entwined with another's pain, you risk losing the thread of yourself. The world doesn't teach empaths how to protect themselves. It celebrates their sensitivity, calls it a superpower, but rarely speaks of the cost. The unconscious empath is like a house with no locks, open to every passing storm. And storms come, oh, they come. The unhealed wounds of others, the collective rage of a family, a community, a lineage, they find the empath, because the empath is open. But openness without discernment is a wound, not a gift. It's an invitation for the world's shadows to take up residence in your psyche. This is where we begin, with the truth that empathy, unchecked, can consume you. It's not enough to feel. You must learn to discern what's yours and what's not. You must learn to name the shadows you carry, to see the addiction for what it is, not a moral failing, but a pattern, a pull toward pain that feels like love but isn't. The empath's journey isn't about closing their heart. It's about learning to hold it with a spine, to feel without falling, to witness without merging. And that journey starts with a single, radical act, turning inward. You felt it, haven't you? That pull, that strange allure when someone's pain calls to you. It's not just compassion, it's deeper, almost primal, like a hook in your chest tugging you toward their darkness. For the empath, this isn't just a moment of connection, it's a seduction. The pain of others becomes a siren song, and without knowing it, you sail straight into the rocks. This is the heart of the addiction, not to drugs or drink, but to the act of carrying what others cannot bear. It's time we unravel why. Imagine a man, mid-30s, sitting in a coffee shop. He's quiet, observant, the kind of person who notices the barista's forced smile, the couple in the corner hiding their tension. He feels it all, their weariness, their unspoken arguments, like static in his veins. He doesn't just notice, he absorbs. By the time he leaves, he's heavy, as if he's carrying their stories in his body. He tells himself it's his gift, his purpose, to feel what others feel. But at night, when he's alone, he can't shake the weight. He dreams of a forest where the trees weep, their sap pooling at his feet, and he wakes up wondering why he's so tired. This is the empath's dance with suffering, not just feeling it, but needing it, chasing it, because somewhere along the way, it became part of who they are. Why does this happen? The answer lies in the unconscious, that vast, untamed sea beneath the surface of our minds. The empath doesn't just feel pain, they're drawn to it because it mirrors something within them, something unhealed, something buried. Maybe it's a childhood wound, a moment when they learned that love comes through fixing, soothing, saving. A girl who learned to calm her mother's storms by being the good one. A boy who sensed his father's rage and made himself small to keep the peace. These early lessons carve grooves in the psyche, and over time, those grooves become paths. The empath walks them without thinking, seeking out pain because it feels familiar, because it feels like home. But there's more to it than personal history. The empath's addiction to pain is also archetypal, tied to patterns older than any one life. Think of the myths, the healer who takes on the sickness of the village, the martyr who suffers for the sins of others. These are not just stories, they're blueprints, energies that live in the collective unconscious and find a home in the empath's soul. When you feel someone's pain so deeply that it becomes yours, you're not just being kind, you're stepping into a role, an archetype, that's been played for centuries. The wounded healer, the savior, the sacrificial lamb. These archetypes are magnetic, seductive, because they promise meaning. They whisper, if you carry this pain, you matter. If you save them, you are whole. And yet, this is where the trap tightens. The empath, in their desire to help, often becomes entangled in what I call psychic enmeshment. It's not just feeling for someone, it's becoming them, letting their pain colonize your inner world. You meet someone broken, someone whose wounds sing to you, and suddenly you're not just witnessing their story, you're living it. Their grief becomes your grief, their chaos your chaos. You might call it love, loyalty, or duty, but it's something else, a merging, a loss of boundaries, where you stop knowing where you end and they begin. The path forward isn't easy. It asks you to face the parts of you that crave the chaos, that find comfort in the familiar ache of someone else's suffering. It asks you to question, why do I need this? What am I avoiding in myself when I dive into their pain? The answers might sting, but they're the beginning of freedom. Because when you stop being a sponge for the world's shadows, you start to become something else, a mirror, reflecting not just pain, but possibility. You've walked through rooms where the air feels thick with unspoken pain, haven't you? You sense it, the quiet despair in a friend's eyes, the buried anger in a stranger's voice, and it clings to you like damp cloth. For the empath, this isn't just a passing moment, it's a call, a summons to step into the storm of someone else's psyche. But here's where the path twists. What if the greatest act of empathy isn't to carry that storm, but to stand beside it, unswayed? This is the alchemy of boundaries, the art of feeling deeply without being consumed. It's not about shutting out the world, it's about learning to hold your own shape within it. Imagine a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, waves crashing below, the wind howling with voices, grief, fear, longing. She doesn't turn away, but she doesn't leap in either. Her feet are rooted, her breath steady, and though the voices tug at her heart, she remains herself. This is the empath who has learned boundaries, not as walls but as a living membrane, porous yet firm, allowing connection without collapse. It's a skill, not a gift, a skill forged in the fire of self-awareness, because without it, the empath risks becoming a vessel for everyone else's chaos. Why is this so hard? Because boundaries feel like betrayal to the unconscious empath. To say no, to step back, to refuse to absorb someone's pain, it can feel like abandoning them, like failing at love. But this is the lie the addiction to pain tells you, that your worth lies in how much you can endure, that love means bleeding for others. I once knew a young man, a poet, who described his life as a revolving door for other people's crises. He'd listen for hours, feel their anguish as his own, and then wonder why he couldn't write anymore. He told me, if I don't help them, who will? But the truth was, his help wasn't always helping, it was enabling, propping up patterns that kept both him and them stuck. This is where the archetype of the martyr creeps in, cloaked in compassion. The martyr whispers that suffering is noble, that sacrifice is love. But sacrifice without discernment is just self-destruction in disguise. The empath who doesn't learn boundaries becomes a magnet for those who feed on their openness, people who, consciously or not, seek someone to carry their unprocessed pain. The narcissist who needs a mirror, the victim who needs a savior, the chaotic who need a stabilizer, these are the ones who find the empath, because the empath's unguarded heart is a beacon. I once worked with a woman, a mother, who felt her family's emotions so deeply she could predict their moods before they spoke. She'd adjust her entire day, her words, her actions, to keep them steady. But she was unraveling, her dreams filled with images of sinking into quicksand, her family standing above, watching. We worked on one simple practice, pausing before she responded to their emotions, asking herself, is this mine to carry? Over time, she noticed something profound. When she stopped absorbing their pain, her family began to face their own. Her boundaries didn't just free her, they freed them, too. This is the paradox of boundaries, they don't disconnect you, they deepen connection. When you stop merging with others' pain, you create space for real intimacy, where both of you can be whole. But this requires unlearning the addiction to suffering, the belief that you're only valuable when you're saving someone. It means facing the part of you that finds purpose in pain, that feels alive only when you're needed. That part isn't your enemy, it's a wound, often born in childhood, when you learned that feeling for others kept you safe, kept you loved. The conscious empath doesn't reject this wound, they honor it, but they don't let it rule. They learn to ask, what am I feeling right now, and is it mine? They learn to notice when their body tightens, when their mood shifts after a conversation, when they're carrying something that doesn't belong. And they learn to release it, not with coldness, but with clarity. I see your pain, they say, but I don't become it. This is the boundary that turns empathy into power, the line that says, I am here, but I am also me. The journey to this place isn't gentle. It asks you to confront the fear of being alone, of being unneeded, of being selfish. It asks you to trust that your worth isn't tied to how much you can carry for others. But when you step into this alchemy, something shifts. You become a witness, not a sponge. You become a mirror, reflecting not just pain but potential. You become the empath who doesn't just survive their sensitivity, they wield it. You've been there, haven't you? Standing in the wreckage of someone else's storm, feeling their pain so acutely it's as if it's yours, believing, deep down, that if you just hold it long enough, you can fix them. This is the empath's shadow, the part that doesn't just want to feel but to save. It's a seductive role, the savior, cloaked in nobility, promising purpose, whispering that your worth lies in how much you can heal. But here's the truth we rarely dare face. The need to save others is often a mirror for the parts of ourselves we haven't saved. And for the empath, this need can become a quiet addiction, binding them to pain in ways they don't even see. Picture a man in a dream, standing in a vast desert, his arms outstretched, holding up a crumbling wall. Behind it, a flood rages, grief, anger, despair. He's trembling, his strength fading, but he can't let go, because if the wall falls, the flood will consume everything. He thinks he's protecting the world, but the flood isn't the world's, it's one person's, or a family's, or a lineage's. And the man? He's the empath, trapped in the archetype of the savior, sacrificing himself for a battle that was never his to fight. This is where the addiction to pain deepens. It's not just about feeling, it's about believing you're the only one who can carry it, the only one who can make it right. The empath steps into relationships, friendships, even fleeting encounters, scanning for wounds to mend. They're drawn to the broken, the chaotic, the lost, not because they're weak, but because their psyche has learned to equate love with rescue. It's a pattern forged in moments of survival, maybe a child soothing a parent's rage, or a teenager absorbing a sibling's despair. Over time, this becomes a script: if I fix their pain, I am enough. If I carry their shadows, I am loved. But there's a cost to playing the savior. Every time you take on someone's pain, you give away a piece of yourself. You become their anchor, their confidant, their emotional landfill, and in the process, you risk losing your own center. I once knew a woman, a counselor, who described this perfectly. She'd sit with clients, absorbing their stories, their trauma, their tears, until she felt like a vessel overflowing with everyone else's darkness. She'd go home, unable to sleep, haunted by their voices. She thought she was helping, but she was drowning. Her dreams showed her standing in a circle of mirrors, each reflecting someone else's face, none showing her own. She had become a vessel for their pain, but she'd lost her own reflection. This is the shadow of the savior archetype. It thrives on the empath's need to be needed. It's not just compassion, it's a transaction, a silent agreement where the empath trades their energy for a sense of purpose. And the people they save? They don't always heal. Some lean harder, demand more, because the empath's willingness to carry their pain becomes a crutch. Others pull away, sensing the empath's need to fix them as a kind of control. Either way, the empath is left holding the weight, wondering why they feel so empty. The savior archetype isn't just personal, it's archetypal, woven into the collective psyche. It's the Christ carrying the cross, the bodhisattva delaying nirvana to save others, the mother who gives until she's hollow. These stories resonate because they speak to something deep in us, but they also carry a warning: sacrifice without wisdom is consumption. The empath who plays the savior without boundaries risks becoming a martyr, not out of love, but out of an unconscious need to prove their worth. So how do you break this cycle? You start by facing the shadow within. Ask yourself, why do I need to save them? What part of me feels incomplete without their pain? The answers might lead you to uncomfortable places: a childhood where you learned that love means fixing, a fear of being unneeded, a belief that your sensitivity is only valuable when it's in service to others. These aren't flaws, they're wounds, and they need your attention, not your denial. This is the work of individuation, of becoming whole. It's not about closing your heart or turning away from pain. It's about standing in your own center, feeling deeply but not losing yourself. It's about trusting that you are enough, even when you're not carrying the world's shadows. The empath who learns this doesn't just survive their sensitivity, they transform it into something radiant, something that illuminates without burning. You felt the pull to dive into someone else's pain, to hold it close as if it were your own, but have you ever turned that gaze inward? Have you dared to walk into the shadowed corners of your own psyche, where the roots of your empathy lie? This is the underworld of the empath, not a place of other people's suffering, but of your own unclaimed wounds, your own unspoken truths. To break the addiction to pain, you must descend here, not to save anyone else, but to reclaim yourself. This is where the real work begins, where empathy transforms from a reflex into a sacred act. Imagine a cave, deep and endless, its walls etched with symbols you can't quite read. At the center, a figure sits, you, but not the you who walks in the daylight. This is the you who carries the weight of every pain you've ever absorbed, every role you've played to feel loved. The air is heavy with questions. Why do I need to feel their pain? What am I running from in myself? The empath's journey isn't just about feeling less, it's about facing these questions, about meeting the parts of you that learn to merge with others suffering to survive. This descent is no small thing. The underworld is where your shadows live, the parts of you that crave the chaos of others' pain, that find safety in being needed, that believe love must hurt. These aren't weaknesses, they're strategies, born in moments when you had no other way to cope. Maybe you were the child who sensed a parent's unspoken grief and learned to carry it to keep the peace. Maybe you were the one who absorbed a family's tension, becoming the emotional regulator because no one else could. These moments carved you, shaped your empathy into something more than feeling. It became a shield, a way to belong. The underworld reveals the origins of the empath's addiction to pain. Often, it's rooted in trauma, not the loud kind, but the quiet wounds of childhood. A girl who learned to read her father's silences to avoid his anger. A boy who felt his mother's sadness and made himself her light. These children became empaths not from grace but from necessity, their sensitivity a survival tool. But what served you then can trap you now. The hypervigilance that kept you safe as a child can become a compulsion to feel everyone's pain, to fix it, to make it yours. I recall a woman, a writer, who described her empathy as a curse. She'd feel her friends' heartbreaks, her colleagues' stress, even strangers' anxieties in a crowded room. She thought it was her duty to hold it all, but it was eroding her. In our work, she shared a dream of a tree with roots that stretched into her chest, pulling her life into the earth. That tree was her underworld, showing her that her empathy was entangled with her own unhealed roots, her mother's unspoken sorrow, her father's buried rage. To free herself, she had to name those roots, to separate her pain from theirs. This descent isn't about hardening your heart, it's about strengthening it. It's about learning to feel your own pain with the same compassion you offer others. It's about recognizing that your empathy, when unconscious, can become a way to avoid yourself. The underworld doesn't ask you to stop feeling, it asks you to feel with clarity, to know what's yours and what's not. It asks you to release the belief that you must hurt to be loved, that you must save to be whole. When you emerge from this descent, you're not the same. You're not a sponge, soaking up the world's shadows. You're a vessel, strong enough to hold your own light and dark. You begin to see that empathy isn't about carrying pain, it's about witnessing it, about standing in its presence without losing yourself. This is the empath's initiation, to descend, to face the shadows within, and to return with a heart that feels deeply but stands firmly in its own truth. You've walked through the shadows, faced the pull of other people's pain, and descended into your own underworld. Now, you stand at a threshold, not of loss, but of becoming. This is the transfiguration of the empath, where sensitivity is no longer a burden to carry or a trap to escape, but a fire to wield. The conscious empath doesn't just feel, they illuminate. They don't just absorb, they reflect. They become a presence that holds space for truth without being consumed by it. This is the final alchemy, where empathy becomes wisdom, and the addiction to pain gives way to a deeper calling, to be whole. I once knew a man, a therapist, who spent years absorbing his clients' stories, their trauma seeping into his dreams. He'd wake up heavy, as if he'd lived their lives in his sleep. But through our work, he began to change. He dreamed of a lake, its surface still, reflecting the sky. He stood on the shore, watching, not diving in. When he woke, he realized the lake was him, not a vessel to hold the world's pain, but a surface to reflect its truth. He began to practice this in his sessions, listening deeply, feeling fully, but not merging. His clients didn't need him less, they trusted him more, because his presence was clear, not clouded by their shadows. This is the power of the transfigured empath. You become a mirror, not for pain, but for potential. You show others what they've forgotten about themselves, not their wounds, but their strength, their capacity to heal. You do this not by fixing them, but by being whole yourself, by showing what it looks like to feel deeply and still stand tall. This requires trust, trust that your worth isn't tied to how much you carry, trust that others can face their own pain, trust that saying no to entanglement is saying yes to real connection. This is your invitation, to speak your own name, to remember who you are when you're not carrying the world. It's not about turning away from pain, it's about meeting it with sovereignty. The conscious empath doesn't run from sensitivity, they refine it. They ask, is this mine? Am I feeling or fusing? Am I helping or controlling? These questions aren't doubt, they're discernment, the compass that keeps you grounded in your own soul. And what of relationships? Here, too, everything changes. The unconscious empath is drawn to the wounded, to those whose pain feels like a call to action. But the transfigured empath seeks clarity, connection rooted in truth, not trauma. They choose partners, friends, communities who see them, not just need them. They no longer fill loneliness with the chaos of others' pain. They sit with the silence, listen to its wisdom, and trust that their worth doesn't depend on being a savior. So, if you see yourself in these words, if you felt the weight of others' pain, the pull to save, the fear of losing yourself, know this: you are not a vessel for the world's shadows. You are a threshold, a place where pain meets wisdom, where feeling becomes seeing. Step back from the storms that aren't yours. Face the silence within. Speak your own name. You are not here to drown in suffering, you are here to reflect truth, to stand as a mirror for what is possible. And in that act, you don't just survive your sensitivity, you sanctify it, turning empathy into a light that guides without burning.